call the March 10th meeting of the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome. This board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendation today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council, although for those that have the agenda, there is nothing that's due for a vote this afternoon. It's merely a, if you will, workshop session, data to be presented by Mr. Collins and staff. So I'm going to dispense with the remainder of the opening remarks and immediately call for the roll.
Christensen?
Here.
Haas?
Here.
Jasinski?
Here.
Staple?
Here.
Von Schneider?
Here.
Becker?
Here. Which brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes from the last meeting, January 30th.
So moved. Second.
Anyone with any comments, questions, concerns, additions, or deletions? Seeing none, call the roll on approval.
Christensen?
Aye.
Haas?
Aye.
Jasinski?
Aye.
Staple?
Aye.
Von Schneider?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye. Which then brings us to public comment, and since we're in the room by ourselves, I will dispense with that item as well, which brings us then to new business. First item being review of 2019 crash data.
Yeah, so each year we kind of look at our crash data from the previous year. Last year we had two presentations, one by the DOT staff and one by East Central. So since I've been doing these reports last couple of years, they actually have a really good program online called Community Maps that's on the Wisconsin DOT website. You can get at the basic access to some crash locations and things like that on there, so you can see where there's a crash history. I was going to show it to you again on here, but I was having some problems getting it to download quick enough. However, if you look at the report I handed out, the number of crashes in 2019, so this is based off of the reporting that the Wisconsin DOT collects from basically from law enforcement agencies. They now put that into their system pretty much within a day or two, so when a police officer fills out a report, it goes directly into the state system, and then we can pull that data after that. So the number of crashes in the city increased just a tiny bit from 2018 to 19. However, it still was historically pretty low, or near the, I'd say it's probably near the average for the post-roundabout era. So we had about 1,259 crashes last year, and that excludes deer crashes. And if you look at the trends, that's pretty close to the historical average. However, as we've been noticing the last few years, since we've had the roundabouts, the number of, which was, our first roundabouts were in about 2010, that our number of injuries and fatalities have gone down since that time quite a bit, and they've kind of been holding steady now. In 2010, we had about 609 injuries, and last year we had about 354, so it's almost 50% less. And that is basically attributed to the roundabouts having less angled crashes, which tend to be the most severe. When you're in a roundabout, they're generally lower speed and they're more side swipes, glancing blows versus the T-bone accidents you would have at a traditional intersection. Then I looked at the number of reportable crashes with biker pedestrian involved, and that decreased slightly. It's still, we'd like to get that a little bit lower. However, in the last 6 years, at least that since I've been here, we have invested pretty heavily in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. Things such as the rectangular rapidly flashing beacons, the overhead LED crossing signs, along with some speed boards in some cases have been installed at many intersections like 9th in Minnesota, South Park in Delaware, over by the Wild Trail and Summit and Congress. So those things help make motorists more aware of pedestrians, as well as we've got the pedestrian flags at the roundabouts. We got what's referred to as the Hawk signal on High Avenue in the University, which is one of the newer types of technology for pedestrian crossing. And then when Main Street was reconstructed, it was made more pedestrian friendly by being narrower and having some bump outs and things like that. So that's something that we continue to work with the Bike and Pedestrian Committee on each year. We've actually had some bike and pedestrian days as well the last couple of years. We've had one in each of the past 2 years. In addition, the police department has a motorcycle officer. For the last few years, that's when they're able to allocate him to do some safety and some education enforcement at roundabouts for pedestrian crossings and things of that nature. So then what I do is to look at some high crash locations. It's helpful to improve safety if we can identify locations where the crash rate and frequency might be higher than expected. And there's basically, mostly what I looked at this year was the frequency, but then you also take into account the rate, which is basically based on the traffic volume. And a higher crash rate indicates a location where you could possibly do some countermeasures that would improve overall safety. If there's a higher crash frequency, it can provide a clearer picture of potential causes of safety at locations. So those are things that we can use to potentially improve some different areas that are experiencing higher crash rates. So each year I try to kind of look at the higher crash areas in the city. Last couple years, or well, I should say last year, we looked at Jackson in New York, and we implemented the no left turns during peak hours. And it looks like there were only 3 crashes at the intersection in 2019. One was a left turn, but it was about 1 p.m., so outside of that restricted zone of 3 to 7. One was somebody ran a red light, and the third was a rear end, but it was caused by distracted driving. So the prior year we had 7, and they were average from 2014 to 18, we averaged about 11 per year. So that no left turns during peak hours, we implemented in July of 2018, so that I can say was successful and had a positive impact there. This year, I'll try to pull it up on the screen, but I gave you a copy of I worked with East Central, and we looked at the top 10 crash locations for 2019. So there, the roundabouts are traditionally higher crash locations just due to the volume. Those are the busiest intersections in the city. So it's expected that they would have a high crash frequency just based on the amount of traffic it's carrying. The ones off the Interstate 41 are under DOT jurisdiction, and then the ones in the city are under the city jurisdiction. So they're still somewhat relatively new. However, as we've seen throughout the last few years, as people got more familiar with them, the crash rates have gone down. Those are difficult to deal with because any additional safety measures are pretty costly just because of the physical restrictions with roundabouts. We did add, like I said, the pedestrian crossing flags to help with pedestrians at those locations. So in lieu of those roundabouts and continuing to see if there's anything that we can do there, the 2 intersections that caught my attention were Jackson and Irving. That one is, there doesn't appear to be a common cause of crashes there. Distracted driving is still a pretty big factor in most of the crashes that I look at nowadays. There were a few rear ends and a few with people backing out of the driveways that weren't paying attention. However, throughout the city, besides distracted driving, one of the main causes of crashes is those left turns, so offset left turns, which we've talked about over the last few years. So the issue is basically this diagram here, which we have on Jackson Street. So if you're turning left potentially here, you have another car waiting to turn left to go the opposite direction, and your view of the curb lane is obstructed. So what happens a lot of the time is one of the two vehicles that's turning left gets impatient and they don't see the car coming in the curb lane. That is a concern at Jackson and Irving, as well as at other intersections. What we try to do wherever we can is create what this would be considered a negative offset. This would be a zero offset. And what we mean by that is the left turning vehicles are facing each other. So therefore you can see the oncoming traffic and you only have to cross one lane of traffic to make your left turn. So we try to implement this wherever we can when we're reconstructing intersections, and if we do any type of restriping or anything, we're always trying to get to this if we can. Even better than that, but this involves medians and is a lot more costly, is if you can do what's considered a positive offset, because you're moving the left turn over and then you've got an even clearer view of, you're narrowing the lane so you have a clearer view of vehicles that are oncoming when you turn left, and you don't necessarily even have to worry about the other opposing left turning vehicle. So that intersection's a part of the Jackson Street Safety Study, which is currently being worked on. I know there'll be some recommendations for that and some of the other intersections throughout the corridor based on what the consultants have presented at the public meetings so far. So there's that one, and then the other intersection that came to got my attention this year is Wisconsin and Algoma. That one's kind of a challenge too. It's a very busy area near UWO and a couple of their parking lots. So actually, a couple of crashes that occur at or near their parking lots get coded to that intersection. There isn't real common cause there. There were a couple rear end crashes, a couple caused by running red lights, a couple by vehicles turning left from the right lane, a couple in the parking lot. But the root cause in most of those appeared to be inattentive driving. And I think with being near the college, that probably goes hand in hand a little bit with having younger drivers and being a little bit more distracted. And then also, I don't think it was a issue so much in this year, but we have with the bridge being out, Wisconsin's obviously a lot busier than it has been. It's really busy right now, but it was out for a week or two earlier this year as well. So what I'm going to do is I'll continue to use the tools available, as well as the police department does, to try to analyze some of those crash trends using their online software. They're continually improving that. So it's getting easier and easier to get to the crash data faster. But I guess my take from what I looked at this year was, that the Jackson Street Safety Study will definitely have some recommendations for the Irving intersection. So that's the one I hope to improve this year. And then we'll continue to encourage the police department and the general public to focus on distracted driving wherever they can. And we'll continue to try to eliminate those offset left turns where we can. So that's kind of a summary of the crash trends from last year. Any questions?
I just asked the question as far as the offset situation. Has there been any research done north of the roundabout where you got the pick and save lots and McDonald's, and you got offset left turns going on there all the time?
Well, there you have a center turn lane.
Yeah, there's a shared left turn lane there,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
So you don't have that offset left turn. You do have where you have to cross two lanes of traffic to go, from that, because that's a five
Go
lane.
either direction.
Yeah,
Right.
but you don't have the offset left turns. Generally, the offset left turns are where you have two opposing left turns in opposite lanes, and you can't see the curb lane. There, actually, both vehicles are potentially in that shared left turn lane. So they would be, if they were, they'd be facing each other.
Yeah. But there's no crash sites up there.
I wouldn't say there's no crashes there, but it hasn't
Hasn't
made it
been
to
an
the
issue?
top. No, I've been doing this for about 6 years. The only area that I've noticed where there was, and it didn't come up on this year's report, in previous years, and that would be more like Murdoch in Kentucky, turning in and out of that shopping complex there. there's probably a little bit more of a crash trend there than north on Jackson. And most of those, it was.
Do you see anything change with the no left turns on New York, Jackson, with people going other ways to get around it? Or has there been any?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned earlier, the crash trend has went down. However, as far as if people are taking alternate routes, I haven't heard anything. And then the other one, that Murdoch in Wisconsin, before we did the road reconfiguration, which was a higher crash intersection, but now it's pretty low now. The same thing for Murdoch and Vinland and Elmwood. So that's really seemed to have had a positive impact there.
Also helped down on Vinland to the
Yes. Yep.
west.
Yep. Definitely.
Anyone else with a question? Mr. Peschel?
Sure. Thank you. I apologize for being late and for having you to answer a question that you may have answered already. So my question actually relates to table 3, relates to crashes with bikes or pedestrians involved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, what's the general area of is there a general area where a lot of these crashes take place, or is it kind of willy-nilly all over the
Yeah, I didn't really see any trend. I'd say I've seen probably. I didn't really even notice a trend. I mean, I noticed a couple of them were down, like near downtown, but the rest of them were all spread out, so I didn't really see any grouped anywhere.
Sure. Is there, let's just say bicycles and stuff, is there any, is there any other signage, or were they near like the bicycle lanes or designated areas for bike lanes and stuff like that?
No, I didn't really notice anything like that.
So we didn't really look that closely as to where we know where they
Right.
happened, but we
Yep.
don't necessarily know how that stuff is signed or any of that. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't look into that detail.
Well, and is it possible that some of those bike issues took place on the actual sidewalk as well?
Yes, that's
It
possible.
is.
Okay. Is there a way to differentiate that through this data? For the future, obviously.
Yeah,
Doing
I
it
could.
reactively is,
Yeah.
because obviously I think that'll shed some light on the
Yeah.
effectiveness of the bike lanes, potentially.
Yeah,
And
that's something I could actually look at for a future meeting, because it's with 23, that's not that many to look at.
It's not that many, but it's still 11% increase, from the year before
Yeah,
in
that's
regards
true.
to the pedestrians, and that's more than double. It's well more. So
Yeah, that's something interesting I could look into. Because you can actually I couldn't get it to, I was going to show you if I can get it to load right on here. But anyway, on the community maps, you can actually look at the map, and I can just choose flag bike crashes, or that.
Sure.
Basically, when the police do a report, they flag bike, and that's what this is reporting. So I can just map those.
okay.
So yeah, we could look at that.
It'd be interesting to see, just like in regards to bikes, how close were they to designated bike lane areas or, bike trail stuff.
Sure.
It might be useful information in regards to how we encourage people to use those spaces that have been implemented within our plan as well. So, and then gives us a little bit more information of, are we signifying the right spaces and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, we definitely can look at that.
Anyone else with a question for Mr. Collins? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Which then brings us to staff statements. So again, back to you.
Yeah, so just a couple things. The Oshkosh Avenue with the bridge being closed, continue to encourage motorists to seek alternative routes. Wisconsin Street's become extremely busy, which we expected. However, I did talk to a few people, and we've talked about this in the past. The issue is on Wisconsin, between the bridge and Church, and Church and you have 3 intersections all pretty tightly spaced and all signalized. So we try to keep traffic moving through there the best we can, but we're limited with how much space. So we really can't do much to adjust the traffic signals just because there isn't enough time without backing traffic up even further past Church on Wisconsin. So the few people I've talked to, like if you're going to the university, for instance, if you're coming from the south or the east, I would encourage people to use Oregon, Jackson Street, and then you could take Pearl or Algoma, and then you can go through the Wisconsin intersection at the light. And the few people I talked to that did that, they called back and said, wow, that was great. You know, I wish I would have thought of that before, because it's a lot less busy. So the other call we've gotten quite a bit is if you're taking the detour, so if you're going down Sawyer and you turn left onto Witzel, that's also a very busy intersection. And the same thing, the signals are coordinated on Witzel, so it's hard to really take time from anywhere. But what you could do, and which would be a lot easier, I encourage people to, if you take Taft over to Campbell Creek, there's a lot less traffic than you hit the traffic signal at Witzel. That's another alternative. So those are probably the two areas we've taken the most calls, but there are options out there. It's just you got to think a little bit, plan a little bit ahead, try taking a different route, and that'll help potentially alleviate some of the congestion on Wisconsin and on that bridge.
Remind us again, Jim, if you would, what's the tentative completion?
It's not supposed to, well, the waterway is going to be open, I believe, the end of April. However, the bridge is not going to be open till about June. I think it was mid to end June.
And the date
June
hasn't.
18th on the.
Yeah.
That sounds about
And
right.
again, I wanted to get that out there for public dissemination, because there's been some conversation that I've heard and seen about, well, they started late, so it's going to run long.
No.
And the date has not changed.
No.
It's always been, and again, I just want to make sure the public understands that yes, in fact, it did start late, but we've been promised that they're going to ramp it into fourth or fifth gear and get it done on the timeline they originally proposed. So.
Yep, they had a hard completion date
Right.
from the state, so
Oh.
that's correct there. It didn't impact the time completion date at all.
Good deal. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Collins on the bridge issue on Oshkosh Ave? Go ahead, Mr. Peschel.
Thank you. Just coming back to you talking about those alternative routes and everything.
Yeah, sure.
Have we promoted those anywhere? I mean, I assume that we have. So,
Yeah, I haven't personally, other than people that call,
okay.
and encourage them to try
So
something.
then it might be good for something to put up on the website or, through one of our Facebook pages or something.
Sure.
So, and then my question, I actually went through the Algoma Congress intersection last night,
Mhm.
and I was surprised when I was at a stoplight. The light was stopped. It wasn't blinking like a four-way red at all through that intersection, and I'm just wondering, and this was 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So I'm just wondering if there's a reason why we're not having a blinking light, when we're having regular stoplights are still working there.
Yeah, the Algoma and Congress, that's still a busier intersection just because people are coming to and from the university through that way. High in Congress, we actually reversed the timing where we used to give preference to Congress, and now we're giving preference to High, and I think that's a 60-30 split. So now we're giving 60 seconds to High and 30 to Congress. That one, somebody did ask me about last night at State of the City, if we could make that one flash in red, so that was something
Yeah,
we're
when I was
looking to do.
when I was at the intersection, it was a long red light because there was no traffic there at
Yeah.
all. I was the only car there,
Sure.
and so it just I couldn't fight the urge to move forward quickly.
Yeah, that,
You heard it here, folks.
You
yeah.
did. I told the chief last night too. So if I get a ticket, I get a ticket.
Yeah, that's something we were going to look at because somebody asked about. That one I don't think we'd put in flash, but we might be able to adjust the timing. The High in Congress, we could potentially put in flash. The issue, we'd probably do all red. The issue I have with flash is they tend to be higher crash rates when we have signals in flash because people don't obey them. I mean,
Sure.
it's a little bit more the red amber flash that people tend to ignore, but we could potentially
And I think lessening the amount of time on that stoplight, I think is good, especially at certain times of the, of the evening when
Right.
there's going to be there is very minimal traffic at that time. But I think it makes sense, well, I guess my question would be to you is you have the ability to manage how those lights run throughout the day, right? So
Yep.
you can set one to be the normal, optimal time to run for a stoplight, and then you can shorten it later when you know that area is not being used as much, correct?
Right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and that one's, like I said, generally that's a pretty busy intersection, but yeah, now it is obviously a lot
Yeah.
less. So that Algoma's still busier than High. The High I wouldn't be as concerned about. But yeah, we actually talked about that last week, so we're gonna look into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, which then brings us to the Jackson Street safety update.
So the Jackson Street, the consultants are working on that Jackson Street safety study from Murdoch to Church. So they had their second public meeting last Wednesday. So they've been working on it. They took a lot of feedback last Wednesday. They're going to take that back and take that into account for their what they're working on. And then they're doing a corridor study from Murdoch to the Highway 41. So I anticipate that, they're going to continue. They're going to take the feedback they got, make any modifications that they might need to, and then they'll have a third public meeting. And then that plan will start getting wrapped up towards late summer, early fall. It'll ultimately go to council, but towards the end of there, then you guys will get a chance to see that. Unless you can make it to the public meetings, I'd encourage you to do that when we have the next one. I know Ross and Bill were at the last two. So they're working through it.
Any questions for Mr. Collins on that issue?
Well, yeah, I guess so. They seem to want to stop the road diet before you get to the roundabout. When we had our association get-together to organize the neighborhood thing, there were two main issues. One was speed, and the other was safety that the residents discussed. And it doesn't change, let me put it this way, the roundabout to Nevada or Congress and so on, where there might be a change, the speed is still an issue there as well as the rest of the Jackson Street. So not too in favor of stopping it before the roundabout. I think the speed issue, as well as the residents and pedestrians and bikers and all that, it's still a safety issue up to and including the roundabout.
Yeah, I know that the consultants that heard your feedback and they're going to take that into consideration. They said they would, but I do know they're going to have to, and for the rest of you that weren't there, so one of the options and they're looking at is they had 3 different options currently. There's obviously leave it 4 lanes and then try to do some traffic calming, I guess I'll call it. Maybe put a couple speed boards up or something along those lines was one option. Another option was to do a road reconfiguration, also known as a road diet, where they would go down from 4 lanes to basically 1 lane in each direction with a shared left turn lane. One option option 2 started at Nevada, and then they showed option 3, which would do something similar, which started at New York and went from New York to Church. So one went from Church to Nevada, one went from Church to from Church, one went to Nevada, one went to New York. And then they also were proposing potentially adding some crosswalks and bump outs. Bump outs obviously are probably the most expensive, and I don't know, what the budget is for that type of thing, but those are things they looked at. I mean, so the consultants would be better to answer any specific questions about it, but I can just tell you that's from the public meeting, that's what they
Yeah.
looked at. But I do know that they heard those concerns from, I think you had brought those up there. And then also, I do understand that they're going to have to, they got to, you got 4 lanes going through or, 2 in each direction coming in and out of the roundabout. So they got to transition somewhere. Where that is, I'll leave that's up to them.
Well,
They're the experts at
yeah.
it. But
But if you look at the footprint there, if you're southbound on Jackson and you come to the roundabout, the right-hand lane is not in line with the right-hand lane on the other side of the roundabout. It almost is lined up with the sidewalk in the front lawn. It would be a very simple right turn only there as you enter the roundabout to go west on Murdoch. And the inside lane would be the straight ahead lane because it lines up with the lane, the traffic calming lane going south.
yeah, I wouldn't, just off the top of my head, I would encourage you to send your feedback to the consultants. However, just off the top of my head, there is a lot of traffic at that roundabout. We're just short of 18,000 cars per day. So to take that down to 1 lane going south, it's probably from a traffic, what we call level of service standpoint, I'm guessing that's not real feasible. However, that's something that, they could probably give you a solid answer on because they have the models where they can do that. So there's traffic modeling software they use that tells you, what an acceptable level of service is on, A being free-flowing traffic and F being complete gridlock. And part of their study was to maintain an acceptable level of service for the motorists going through there, which generally is considered a C or above. So I'm sure that's my guess, but you could ask them and they could probably answer it specifically.
You're sacrificing the safety of the people, whether they're walking or biking, or the residents that live on that street, which I'm one of them, by eliminating the traffic calming because you don't want traffic to back up on the roundabout. So the safety of the residents and the fact is of trying to get in and out of your driveway, there is 156 driveways between Church and Murdoch. And you got a couple dozen that are going to be ignored because of the difference, whether it stops at New York or whether it stops at Nevada. You still got the same problem. You're taking care of the safety of the residents only part way. And that's what I thought there would be a conversation about what would really be the best for the neighborhood association because of all those driveways. We go out south to go north because we're not going to cross over 3 and 4 lanes of traffic. And that's just a inconvenience that you live with.
Yeah, I'm sure that, they take all that into account when they come up with their recommendations, and it's still got a long ways to go.
Oh, I understand that. But I think some more verbalization needs to be looked into to satisfy the safety issue as well as the speed issue. That's where I'm coming from.
I do have a
Bill.
question, John. Let's say that once this study is complete, there's a recommendation, goes to the council, council says, hey, it's a great idea. Does the state have the final say on that, or does the council have the say on that?
The state will have input, however, because it is an interconnecting highway, however, it's local jurisdiction. So they would have to, I doubt they would say no. So it's more of a local decision from what I understand.
And is the state lining up with the road calming more so than 4-laners?
The state hasn't given any opinion one way or another, as far as I know.
Another question. Have the police ever stopped a motorcycle in the city of Oshkosh? 'Cause I live right near, I live fairly close to the Park and Jackson, the intersection. And that is, I see people racing. I mean, there was a motorcycle and a guy that had a truck and a trailer, and they're going at it. I mean, they're probably going by, 50 miles an hour at least, but the motorcycles really are just,
Well, those crotch rockets
yeah,
are,
I mean, they really, I'm sure they get up to 60, 70 miles.
oh, yes.
Yeah, that I don't know. We'd have to ask the
I mean,
police
I
department.
think they'd be pretty hard to catch, but,
Well,
they,
when I called the police department on that, they said, where are they? I said, just step outside. You can tell where they are in the whole city because they're so loud. And we had two racing down out of the roundabout south. It was a blur. I mean, they had to be going 70 miles an hour. It was just, and we get that from the college kids, I guess.
Yeah, I know that generally Captain Kaiser comes with you an appointment today, but I can mention too. But I mean, it's kind of like it's the same as like a speeding car. They got to be in the right place at the right time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's can't catch them all.
Anyone else on the Jackson Street issue?
I got one question.
Mr. Peschel?
Sure. So the region from New York to Nevada, just on the east side of that area, is going to be potentially changing in the next 3 to 4 years with a potential new middle school there if that were to pass.
Yep.
Is this something that we're asking them to model out already, and that impact of what that might look like?
No, because they don't have any plans from the school or any. However, though, we have made them aware that that's a possibility. But yeah, without having any concrete plans from the school
Sure.
district. But we have told them that that is happening. It's a conversation that's currently being had.
Yeah, because
They're
that's
aware of it.
that's the location. That area is where is where they're projecting the school to be.
Right.
So,
Yeah, we did make them aware of that.
okay. So is that something that, do we need more information from the district, or do we just not feel that right now is the right time for that information? Or is a little
I
bit
don't
of
know. We could ask them if they. I mean, it wasn't part of their original scope. However, we did make them aware of it so that they could consider it when they come up with their recommendations. I don't know that would change their recommendation any.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something. we can
Well,
ask
when
them.
we start talking
Anymore.
about traffic calming measures, we're basically shifting from where one school is to a different location on
Right.
what I would say is a much busier street than New York Avenue. And so to me, it'd be interesting to see what they would suggest.
Right.
If you were just to put a school, in that area, what would they suggest? I'm pretty sure the neighbors on Jackson would be interested in seeing that type of
Sure.
information too. So I don't know. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, we can
So-
ask them. We did make them aware of it, like I said, but we haven't asked them anything specific. We just told them, be aware that the school district's looking at doing something different with the school and potentially shifting it over to basically where the tennis courts were, from what I understand.
Has the district, Mr. Peschel, had any conversations about which way that building is going to orient itself?
They may have, but I'm not aware of that.
Okay, because, again, my 2 cents to face Jackson is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, and I don't think I disagree with you on that, but I still think it warrants.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just trying not to make a
But
bad
your 2
situation
cents
worse.
is taken, so.
I mean, certainly it's preferable from an aesthetics perspective, but from a logistics and a safety perspective, it's hellish
Yep.
to face it to Jackson. Anyone else on Jackson Street? All right, which then brings us to agenda items for the next meeting, if any.
Well, it sounds like I'll get a little more further information on the bike crashes, so I'll have some data on that.
Anyone else? I will then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.